Before using the Reshape Media Photoshop to FTML script, what you should do is actually visit reshapemedia.com FTML Learn, and you'll get all the basics about FTML. Now there's also a page in regards to Photoshop to FTML which will explain basically how to use the script and what it will do when it is completed, with samples of the files that it actually creates. So the very next step that you do is to actually download the file and continue watching the video. Hi, my name is Richard Pennycook and welcome to Reshape Media. I'd like to introduce you today to something revolutionary, and I'm very excited actually, so I'm just going to get straight to the point. Basically what I'm going to allow you to do is take your Photoshop file, and this could be any Photoshop file. It could be a flyer that you made, it could be a website template that you download, but as long as it's Photoshop, I'm going to show you how you can take that Photoshop file and convert it into an interactive Flash website in one single click. Yes, I said it, only one click. At the end of this video, you'll actually see how you can do it yourself, and you'll be provided with a link that you can download a sample, well, actually this exact sample, so you can try it out yourself, and you can try out your own Photoshop file afterwards. But what you will get in a single click is from Photoshop to Flash. Are you ready? Let's go. Alright, so the very first thing to get started is we're going to have a Photoshop file. Now the one I'm using is called Crisp. It's a template that I downloaded. All the author notes are in there, so you will be able to see it. And I suggest that when you are using someone else's work, you do give them the credit for the work. It is just common courtesy. Now, as long as you have your Photoshop file, and the one I'm using right now, you'll notice that I did have two in the folder. This is a final copy. And when I say final copy, you'll notice that all the actual layer names, they're noted to reflect what the layer actually is. This is all done through the code. This is not something you'll be required to do. But basically, I'm going to show you now how the script runs and what it will produce in the end. So let's begin the script. You'll notice what it begins to do is it will start renaming your layers, but if it notices that the layer name has been renamed, it will skip it, so that way you don't have basically double text, content. So it might get a little bit boring to watch the script. The speed of it will actually depend on your PC itself. If you have a dual core or a quad core, this should be finished within a minute. So let's just skip to the end and see what it produces. Now that the script is complete, let's take a look at some of the files that FTML will create for you. The first thing you'll see is an FTML www folder. This is actually a projects folder for all the exported files that you have while using our script. What the script will create is an HTML file based on the PSD. You'll notice it has the same file name. And also create a subfolder in the skins folder. This is used to just manage all the PNG files that it exports from your PSD. Now, what we're going to do is we're just going to drag this directly into our local host. This is assuming that you've read our guide online. This can be found at reshapemedia.com/ftml. You can see the getting started guide there. You'll be provided with a link to it. What I'm going to do is just basically drag these files into our local host. Now you'll note the path of our local host where the www folder, be it the root of our local host or the root of your web host, what I've done is I've placed an ftml www path. What this is this will just basically generalize all the exports when you're using your local host. And let's take a look really quick at that. Now if you open the HTML file, what you'll see is that each source of the PNG is referencing that path. Now if you are to take this and put this on your website, what you would simply have to do is change the local host, the ftml www path, to your web server and your path, and you're good to go. So now once we have this, let's take a look at what it outputs. And here we have it. Let's refresh the page just to make sure. And what this will create for us is a fully interactive Flash website from your Photoshop file. Now, when I say fully interactive, it is Flash. So everything that Flash can do, FTML can do. And also what it will do is if you have specific layer names in your Photoshop file, it will convert them to Flash Smart Objects. For instance, a button. This button was created from the Photoshop layer because it had the name button in it, as well as these icons. So you'll note that this is Adobe Flash and this is all created from the Photoshop file. Text layers are also active by default, but again, all these settings can be changed within the actual HTML file. So flash text, why don't you give it a try? Load your Photoshop and see what it'll create for you. We're going to take a more detailed look at the files that FTML will create for you, and we're going to start with the HTML file. So let's bring that into your editor of preference. This could be anything, and change the syntax highlighting if you can to XML. This will just give you a better view of the actual code itself. Now what you'll see is FTML will create each necessary object for you based on your Photoshop file. It will also save the actual rendered text content. This is different from the text label, as well as create buttons and add the necessary skins, whereas this be it that if you have a button in the label name, or yes, sorry, the label name, it will actually transfer itself to a button object in FTML. Now you can see the script itself will run and it will actually format the text fully so that it's human readable very well. This can get very complex as well depending on your Photoshop file, or it can be very small if you have a small project. So it's very scalable and it works extremely well. Now let's take a look at some of the PNGs that it creates for you as well. You'll see that it will create a subfolder based on the Photoshop file that we used. Now, in the subfolder of the skins, each of the files is reflective of the layers in Photoshop. So if we take a look at some of the Photoshop layers, you'll notice that they have the same names. You might not see the entire name. This is simply because Photoshop will crop the name at the end. But each PNG will actually be reflective of each Photoshop layer. Now this is all done through the script. This is not something that you have to do or worry about. Let's take a look now at building an FTML website from Photoshop from scratch, and also some of the issues that we might encounter as well as overcoming these issues. So let's go ahead and load our file into Photoshop. Now what you'll notice is that I created a separate copy of the file and I called it web. You can give it an arbitrary name. The reason for this is we want to have a finalized version and also keep a backup of our working copy. So when we bring this into Photoshop, this is a common issue that you're going to notice is that fonts are missing. If you don't have the correct font, that's okay. We're going to deal with actually loading fonts into FTML in another tutorial, so we're going to leave that alone for now. What we can do to basically overcome this first issue is we can click layer, and if you go to type, what you'll notice at the bottom is replace all missing fonts, and this is what we want to do. We want it to change it to the default fonts of the system. This will typically be Arial. So you'll notice that all the fonts have basically been replaced to Arial so that the system can actually render the font. The next thing we want to look at is that we'll have layers that have effects on them. Now, for development, effects are not necessary on the actual graphics themselves. An effect can be a drop shadow or a gradient. These are things that can be done via the code, so they're not actually necessary to be done on the image. There are two ways that we can deal with this. We can either A, go to File, go to Script, and we can either flatten all the layer effects. This will actually rasterize the layer effects, so basically how it looks is the image that you will get. It will not be the default image. Or what we can do is we can go to layer and go to layer style and hide all the effects. And for the purpose of this tutorial, that's simply what we're going to do. We're going to hide all the effects of this. Now what I do want to mention is that the owner of this template that I downloaded, it's called Script Presentation, is actually bevelemboss.net. So you can download this template from their website, or you can visit reshapemedia.com to download it. So I just wanted to make a note to the author. For the rest of the tutorial, I'm just going to actually hide that. Okay, so Oh, sorry, let me just zoom back out so you can actually see this completely. So now another thing that we're going to deal with after that is the fact that there are some layers which use the background of the image. Now the background can trick the eye. If you look at this directly, you'll see that the visible area starts here and actually ends here. Wait, let me drag the line so it's a bit more visible. This is where it starts and this is where it ends. Now the problem with a lot of Photoshop files is that the actual graphic does not end there. The graphic itself might be extended. Now this might be due to an Illustrator import or just the way the graphic itself was created. Now in situations like this, what we need to do is we actually need to cut and paste that graphic so it fills the region. So something that we can do is we can simply select the marquee tool and select around the area that we want to keep. So we can simply cut that, delete the layer, create a new one. Let's paste that in. Move it up and rename it. So what this does is this actually gives the object its correct size and position. Now the problem that this will create in FTML is FTML will actually render the image as is, not the visible area in Photoshop. So you'll notice in this image at the bottom it actually has extra area. So this will be rendered with the image. Now I'll show you the difference as to how the top renders compared to the bottom once we complete the script on this actual Photoshop file. So let's run this and basically see what it exports. You'll notice what it's doing is it's changing each of the file names to an actual suitable code name. For instance, caps is not required when you're doing code, nor is random characters. So what this does is it'll actually format the text so it's something that's legible and something that can be used by developers. This is another huge problem that developers face, but it's easily overcome just through the script. So this is not something you have to worry about. After this is completed, what it will do is it'll actually export each of the images and create the HTML file that's required. So for the rest of this, I'm just going to actually skip the video until the end of this process.